Hello, my friends. This is Rick. This is your seat at the table. Rare evening for me. I'm home by myself, so I get to sit out here in the living room with this sort of stuff, right? Well, I want to talk about player agency, right? Uh, like I often do when I'm out working really long hours and odd hours of the night, I will go through the YouTube channels of some of the places or the channels that I subscribe to that I have interest in and common ground with the creators of those channels and view their latest stuff and often comment on them. Or, as we see, this is not a video response by any means. It's just my 2 cents worth, nickels worth on the subject. Player agency is pretty straightforward. I mean, first off, I want to comment that thanks, Robert, the narrator, because you kind of tripped a trigger when I was listening to your take and your opinion on the subject, and I got me thinking. It says, there was a time when we were young men, or young people, and we started in the hobby, and we were playing to have fun, and we were playing to explore and find this develop and grow within this great hobby that we like. And we didn't have terminology that we have today. We have a great broad lexicon of terms and concepts and techniques and other things that go hand in hand, part and parcel with the role-playing game hobby and in general. And we didn't consider things like player agency. It was a given that the GM did the GM things, the players did the player things. They took care of their characters, and the player and the GM took care of pretty much everything else. And yeah, it's really a fine line. Sometimes there's a broad chasm between terms like railroading and player agency and the social contract, etc., etc. This is all legal mumble jumble and stuff that come out from a bunch of old folks who progressed in the hobby along with the real world and become enamored with a whole lot of acronyms and fancy words and terms for stuff that were basically common sense, right? Granted that we're all, majority of us at some point or another have stepped on the toes of somebody else around the table, whether it was intentional or not, whether it was as the GM versus the player, because sometimes it's hard. We forget that it's not us versus them as the game master or the storyteller. I mean, even that term right there has seen a lot of progression, and we came from what it was just a good old dungeon master, the DM, and then it was as the games expanded and there was more and more genres available, the term DM was applied loosely to others, and then I'm of the opinion that it morphed into the GM or game master, and now we have the storyteller, the narrator, right, etc., whatever you want to call it. So this idea of player agency, about how we are sitting here and trying to honor the fact that our players have this inalienable set of rights, this boundary that we established. I mean, if you go and you look through a number of this, that, and the other thing, there's not a whole lot of particular subject material in the games themselves that talk about this, but there are some guidelines at the beginning of most of the player handbooks and core books and things like this that talk about the areas of responsibility. So there's where we're kind of heading a little bit here. This is where I think Robert was putting his opinion and his take and his feel on this player agency, and I see this in others. So just to be honest, on the up and up, Robert's video got me interested in the concept. So I spent the better part of the last couple nights while I've been working some god-awful hours and viewing about a dozen different videos on YouTube from different groups and players and Nerd Anarchy, for example, I think was one, and I didn't bother to write any of them down, but I viewed the subject on a bunch of people's view and opinions on the subject of player agency, and so I'm better informed so I can apply my own opinion and take on it, and not just be firing some crazy willy-nilly stuff. Because, like I said, it's Saturday night. I worked all night last night, and I'm working all night tomorrow night, so I'm kind of cramming a lot of things into a short window. And the fact that I have the host myself, well, that and the cats, because, you know, not really. And, you know, I'm a little bit into the sauce just a hair. Not a lot, not a lot. This is my second can, which is just considering how tired I am. But that's why I'm rambling a little bit. I'm prone to that anyway, right? All right, so player agency is, as we've established, that players have inedible rights to control their character. The character is their preview. And then as the game master, the storyteller, however you wish to present it, then it behooves us not to try to put ourselves in their shoes or try to enforce on them our concept. We should allow our players to be our players, and the players should be allowed to operate their characters how they wish, no matter how often that might thwart our plans or elaborate effort and work and or etc. This goes hand in hand a little bit with the concept of railroading and sandbox, a consideration of sandbox play. As the player, and then we try to put this into that thing we call a social contract, which is kind of loose and vague. It's pretty well defined. Don't be wrong. The concept of social contract is pretty well defined. But the truth is, it varies from individual to groups to individuals, and it can be morphed and changed. And there's no right or wrong or solid sense. We know what we want and what we're trying to achieve, and ideally, everybody at the table that's come to play, as Robert, the narrator, puts it, our time is terribly valuable today. As we've gotten older, we do not have the luxury. My personal experience as a game player when I was young was, like I said, I was 10 in that bracket, and my friend and I would get out of the elementary school. It's sixth grade, and we had an hour and a half window before his older brothers come home from high school, and we'd run back to his house and borrow his brother's first edition D&D, and we would cram in a game, and that was the incentive for me to go out and get my own rule books. And to get them, another friend whose dad was taking him to a game store I'd never heard of before, never even knew this stuff existed, invited me along. And I didn't tell my parents, and we lived 20 miles away from the city, a small town. So this was an adventure to go out, and I had taken my savings, what I had, was able to buy my first game book, and then from there I was able to mail order things catalog wise because I didn't have access to going to the game store. But once I got old enough to get a driver's license, I was 16. I was a regular fixture there every week. So as a kid, we'd come home from school. Once we got the books, we would come home from school ourselves, and then we would play every day. Every day we would play. And this would be a couple hours. It could be an all-nighter. We would spend a night over a friend's house and get 3 or 4 people together, and that's what we would do, is we just sleep and play and sleep. As we progressed, we got older. We had activities in school. We got jobs, etc., etc. But we still found time to play. But we went from that every day to once a week. Sometimes we might start on a Friday night and play through Saturday as long as we had opportunity to do so. And then, of course, we developed relationships, our first girlfriends, some cases boyfriends, in their cases, etc., whatever. Just trying to be modern here. And from there, we went forward, and our time shrank. And then I got into my 20s, and I had my first marriage and a first divorce, and I had other responsibilities. Then I became a crazy, not so caring about responsibility type person for about 8 years as a bachelor, and I remarried my second wife, and etc. You all know the story. Most of you lived it yourself and still living it. And over time, I spent a lot of money, a lot of years, a lot of effort, and every decade or so, my time to play has shrank and gotten smaller. Like I've said numerous times in a lot of my videos for my channel, I don't have a regular game group anymore. I have not had any since 2015. I think 2014 was when my Flash group broke up, and we all went different directions, and our lives moved and changed. And it's just the way life works sometimes. Now, I've been playing for the last 2 years online through Play by Post and D&D Beyond and various elements to just have some fun and to do things. and that's still considered game time. But my time is valuable, their time is valuable. So we try not to infringe on all that stuff. So in that aspect, when I talk about player agency, I hear a lot of that talk about the rights of the player. Sometimes we forget that the players also have responsibilities. They have responsibilities to come to the table as part of that social contract. But above that, as the character, as the player character, their responsibility is to come to the table with the mindset that we're going to play. That we're not going to spend the entire session diverting into different things. We also, in my opinion, that the player has responsibilities to understand that we do have play planned. That somebody, whether it's you or me or somebody else, has sat down and made the effort to create the world and the session and the episode or whatever we're going to do, even if it's just running it out of one of these multiple modules, right? And the naval idea is that there's a script and there's a broad definition of how your characters can interact within that script, but we have a script, and it's only fair that we honor as a player the person who put the effort into creating that script and presenting us with the open sandbox or the narrow closed sandbox or what have you to play within those constraints. To get this whim to go off on a tangent, the narrator there, he made a point too, is that as he's gotten older, as an old G, an old gamer in the hobby, his expectations are much more defined, and that his time's valuable. And there were times when we were younger and we felt the need to push the boundaries and to explore. And every now and then you get a new GM or a storyteller that you, for whatever reason, you don't agree with how they play the thing or they're running stuff, and you want to push it. And sometimes it's real easy to do that, and I myself personally have done that and been kind of malicious about it, and learned later that I was pretty out of character and out of step for me, and it wasn't a good thing to do. And it's hard sometimes to not want your players to follow the script, and you get a little bit kilter when they don't. And there's a place and time for that. So if you build a stockade out of wood and your players come up with the idea that they're gonna, oh hey, let's burn it down. You know what? Maybe you should have made it out of stone, but since that's their idea, roll with it and adapt and go forward. Don't necessarily try to come up with 16 different reasons why it won't catch on fire. Make the effort. If they can get the thing to burn it down, and then go from there. There's always consequences for every action, right? I mean, I have in my current D&D Beyond, it's a crew that's on a small riverboat, and the previous crew, for the most part, was eliminated or bailed, and so 3 out of 4 new crew have come on board. That's new players, by the way, and the old hat player has acquired a cargo for the crew of chickens, right? Well, they have a MacGuffin on board, and the new players don't necessarily understand or know that there's an evil artifact on board that we're trying to get rid of, and the old hat has it stashed away. He's a paladin. He's very careful about not telling people because it's going to mess with people's heads, and in the process, they've been chased by some bad guys. So now they got a cargo of chickens, and one of the players, one of the druid, decided to sit down and commune with the chickens and have a conversation. Meanwhile, there's one lone rooster who's not in cages that's suddenly on board about, between you and me, yeah, they should be paying attention to that more, but they're not. And that's going to have consequences. Because, so the players have responsibilities to, when they come to the table, to be prepared. It's all part of that social contact, but it's also part of the mindset. If you have a brand new player who has no idea what's going on and they're trying to learn, that's a whole other video for another day. But if you get those players, you always get those new people that come along as somebody who's either not taking it as serious as we do or don't understand the nuances as much as we do. We're back to this legal mumbo jumbo of all these terms and concepts that you and me and a lot of us discuss over and over and over again, that a lot of people have no idea what the heck we're talking about. the idea of player responsibility as well as player agency goes hand in hand. So we're talking about GM agency and GM responsibility, which is going to be a different video because I already know this is video. I have a tendency to run these damn things too long as it is. Uh, yeah, let your players be their players. Let them think outside the box. Let them entertain themselves and have fun and entertain you in the process. If you're the storyteller, if you're a player, do your best when you come to that table. Be as prepared as you can be. Be lenient a little bit. Don't put too much expectations on your GM unless that's your gig. Uh, expect to be entertained, but expect to be entertaining. Keep in mind that there is a script. I mean, it's all fine and dandy to have this idea of an open sandbox where we just come in and we're going to do whatever comes up to our mind. So, but there's another part of that social contract that we keep talking about is the fact that somebody's put some effort in and has expectations. So potentially, as a GM, I like to have 2 or 3 possible scenarios, but I don't. I've learned the hard way not to spend a huge amount of effort in pre-prep of an entire encounter or an entire campaign, because I don't know what the players are going to do or how they're going to go and how things are going to act. Right? I mean, it's just an example of my current D&D Beyond. It's one of the downsides of play-by-post is people can come and go pretty quick. And I have this basic rule that says if you don't respond within X amount of time, it's not fair for everybody else, to keep people hanging in there. So if a week or 2 goes by and you don't fit into the criteria, something's going to happen to your character. And you can make that argument that that's railroading and that that's GM agency or GM whatever at work, but it's part of that social contract that when you first come in, this is how it's going to play. You have a 3-day window to get your response in, even if it's just an acknowledgement that you're still in and waiting for something to happen. But if you go a week or 2, don't expect to come back. Don't get mad and come back and find out your character got knocked overboard or fell off the boat or got left behind, because that's only fair, right? It's the same thing why if I have characters who come in who suddenly want to go off on a wild tangent that has no bearing whatsoever on the mission that's been presented. Now, if I didn't present a good mission or didn't put out a layout saying, well, look, this is kind of where we're heading, I mean, at the same breath, it's part of that the GM should not have to lay out everything for the players in advance, because that kind of takes away the mystery and the excitement and the unknown to have a literal script set down in front of you. So it's a guideline, a set of outlines. It's a potential rough draft for the story, right? In my opinion. So, yeah, player agency is all great and dandy, and there is lots of value and understanding as long as we're all on the same page, the same breath. There's player responsibility. If I'm wrong, if you don't think so, if you have a take on that, by all means, put a comment in below, get your 2 cents worth in, and we'll talk more about it here or there, because I do notice one thing, and we all notice it, those of us connoisseurs of the hobby, which is why we do all these videos in the first place. See, we don't get enough just playing, but we want to share our experiences. We want to share our techniques. We want to share our concepts and ideas, and we want to, as a social community, be involved, whether it's just commenting or whatever. We're actually going to some length to make some pretty grand videos. I mean, I grant you, my stuff is subpar by everybody, by most of what I see out there, but it's the fact that I love this, that everything we do in this hobby, and there's so much potential for fun and excitement and camaraderie that I want to keep being the fan. I keep wanting to cheerlead it on at every opportunity. So don't let player agency necessarily dominate your game. Be fair, be mindful, have fun, be adaptive, right? Be respectful of everybody that comes to the table as much as you can. And if you find yourself overstepped and somebody checks you on it, try to be adult enough to acknowledge the fact that maybe you did. Don't get too argumentative over things. Work forward. Till next time, this is Rick. You guys have a good weekend.